Google is introducing a new privacy policy today, despite warnings it might break European law. Private information collected by one Google service can be shared with its other platforms, allowing the company to build unprecedented profiles of users who sign into its services. So, are the changes good news for consumers or just a massive invasion of online privacy? Simon Gompertz reports.
The power of Google is plain to see for anyone using its search engine. It's how it's wielding that power which is being questioned in France and now in the UK. It's changing its privacy policy, and what that means is combining all the information it has from searching, from emails and from other services, so it knows which adverts to target at people. Critics say nearly half of users aren't aware of what's happening.
They have a duty to consumers in terms of explaining how their information is going to be used. These companies are putting the advertisers' needs before the consumer needs.
Look how much Google owns. YouTube for videos, Blogger for blogs, Gmail for messages and many more. In Newcastle today, a feeling from some that it was sinister for all the services to pool information.
You're out of control of the kind of information that you make in public.
I feel that I'm going to be harassed by these companies when I don't actually need their business.
Many worry that their details are being passed on to advertisers, but Google says that's not true, and it claims it's helping users. In an email to users, the company says it had over 70 different privacy documents. Combining them will make its policy simpler and easier to understand.
We have a combination of information. So we have a privacy center. If you go to the Google front page, you will see a link linking you to information about privacy. So we have a privacy center. We also have an advertising campaign. There's a lot of information about the services that we offer and the data we hold on those services.
Google's been pushing the message today that you can alter the way it uses information by changing the settings. For instance, with YouTube, you can tick or not tick whether they use your account information to decide what adverts to show you. But it's complicated to do that across Google's services, and it doesn't satisfy those who don't want their personal information to be exploited at all. Just because you're using Google doesn't mean your account information is being exploited, though. That only happens if you log into an account. So, if you don't want to be followed on the net, don't log in. Simon Gompertz, BBC News.
Well, let's speak to Dr. Joss Wright, Research Fellow at the Oxford Internet Institute, who joins us from our Oxford studio. So, is Google right? Has it simplified things, or has it just made it a bit more complicated?
Well, it's certainly simplified the way that its privacy policy works. Unfortunately, there's two aspects that can come out of simplifying a policy like this. You can simplify it and make everything good, or you can simplify it and make everything bad. And unfortunately, Google seem, to a large extent, to have simplified everything by giving themselves broader powers and removing a certain amount of user control as to what happens with their personal data.
But as we saw in the report there is user control, isn't there? You just got to make that conscious decision.
To some extent, the difference, the loss of user control specifically that's happened is that previously to the rollout of this new privacy policy, the information you had in different Google services like Gmail, like Google Search and like YouTube were separated, so they created different internal profiles of you. What's happened now is that all that information is being rolled up into one, and there's no way of opting out of this amalgamation of your data. You can log out of Google services, you can log out of YouTube, you can log out of Gmail. However, every time you log in, you tend to stay logged in, and people will often forget that they're being logged in. And so you've lost the ability to really make fine-grained choices about what happens, unless you use very difficult sort of manual approaches like creating different Gmail, Google accounts.
But in the end, isn't this just an irritation? You know, we're going to get hit by a few ads that perhaps we don't want to see, but it's nothing more than that?
Well, there's a great concern about the amount of data and the amount of prediction that Google is able to make about individuals based on the data that they've got. And obviously, it's to Google's advantage to be able to make very accurate predictions and profiles of people. The concern is not necessarily the adverts that we see right now. It's the ability of companies like Google to make predictions about all aspects of your personal life. And if we realise that Google have got the capability through the data that they gather to predict things like our political affiliations, our religious affiliations, our sexuality, that kind of thing, people start to get a lot more worried than when they just see an advert for the car that they were just looking at or the watch they were just looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you're an expert in this. I mean, does it spook you?
It terrifies me, is the simple answer. I make it as difficult as possible for these companies to track me, but it's almost it's too difficult, and I wouldn't advise people on average to opt out of Google services, because you're effectively opting out of a large part of the online society that we now use. And this is why I'm so concerned that Google aren't being very helpful in protecting our privacy and protecting our rights. They noted in your report that they're treating the advertisers better than the consumers. Well, the advertisers are Google's consumers. We're not Google's consumers. We're their products.
OK, just briefly then, what are the rules of thumb? What would you advise to us who don't have your expertise?
My simple advice is to minimise any information that you share with services, and that's for things like Facebook and for things like Google+, the social network there, so minimise the use there. When you browse away from a website like Gmail or like Google Search, then log out. That's the simplest and easiest step you can make to prevent yourself from being tracked, is just to log out of services when you're not using them anymore. Don't assume that because you've clicked away from the page that your interaction with that website or that company has ended.
Dr. Joss Wright, fascinating, thank you. I think I need to spend
really interesting, isn't it?
several hours going through this.
We will be back at the typewriters before you know it.